Good morning, David. I'm with David Beck from Coventry University, who's going to help us this morning to understand a lot more about sustainability in our industry. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Boyd. It's a great honour to be here today to speak about issues of sustainability in horticulture and to consider how the industry can indeed cultivate retail for a much more sustainable future. The presentation I'll be delivering will consider two fundamental questions. The first one is, what is this thing, sustainability, that everybody talks about? And also, why does it matter in the context of horticulture?
Great, something I'm sure we're all very keen to understand and start getting on with in a better way.
Indeed. Well, let's take things forward.
Sustainability is a buzzword which has become highly influential in recent years and is widely used in all sorts of contexts. But it's a slippery idea which means different things to different people. We will start with some context which explains why sustainability has become a critically important idea. Many in the scientific community consider that we are living in a geological epoch which can be called the Anthropocene, meaning a time when human activity is having profound impacts upon Earth's geology and ecosystems. Scary graphs showing alarming trends are an essential part of any presentation about sustainability. So here's the first one. The main trend evident on this graph is of a significant upward trend in all the lines from the 1940s onwards. The lines indicate increases in economic activity, such as GDP growth, population growth, increases in natural resource use, and increases in things like carbon dioxide emissions, ozone depletion, species lost, forests lost, and so forth. The inference being that the drive for growth is associated with significant and ultimately damaging environmental impacts. The second scary graph focuses upon the impacts of these trends upon global climate. The planet is warming and we are on course for a 1.5 degree rise in global temperature, probably much higher if they're not substantial changes in human behaviour. And higher average temperatures means changes in weather patterns with potentially catastrophic impacts. Other dimensions of the Anthropocene include biodiversity loss and depletion and pollution of soil, water and air. Environmental awareness moved into the mainstream at the back end of the 1960s and early 1970s. Seminal events included the moon landing, which put our planet into context. Photos from space provided a sense of the finiteness of the Earth and its resources within an infinite universe. It was in the 1980s that sustainability came to the forefront of debates. The UN published a report entitled Our Common Future, which contained a definition of sustainability that continues to be widely accepted. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The idea has subsequently been refined and argued over many times. The current state-of-the-art thinking focuses upon the three Ps: people, planet and profit. Thus, any activity needs to lie at the intersection of these three elements in order to be truly sustainable. Ultimately, if the planet and its resources are not respected, then there will be not much of a future for people or profit. So, in the context of horticulture, we need to think about the pathways towards sustainability. There needs to be a focus upon reducing or even eradicating negative carbon, water and biodiversity footprints. And whilst the bigger picture seems daunting, we need to remember that every individual action does matter. We can all do little things to contribute to a sustainable future. As we will see in the next part of this video, the horticultural industry is exceptionally well placed to tackle the big stuff and to help individuals do their bit.
Thank you, David, for that introduction. It's sobering to see the realities of what's going on at the moment. Key question though, how does this actually work with us in the horticultural industry?
Consumers are starting to pick up the vibe that there's some real challenges out there and that people need to start making more responsible decisions. If, for example, we look at the outcomes of the Blue Planet documentary with David Attenborough a few months ago, we see that plastic straws literally overnight became like this pariah, and it was seen as completely unacceptable for business to have plastic straws as part of their consumer offer. And I think what we've got to think about in the context of horticulture is to think ahead and think what might be the plastic straws that could become symbolic in the minds of the consumer going forward. But equally we need to think about the positives, because there are a number of positives within the industry. This is an industry about the production of green matter, about the products that sequester carbon, that convert carbon into oxygen and so forth. And actually there's lots of positives here, and I think we've got to start thinking about how the industry can catalyse those positives for the future.
Great, okay, plenty for us to think about.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we now take a little tour of your store and have a look around and look at some of the areas where there are definitely issues, but also pick out on some of the solutions. How does that sound?
Let's do it.
So when a consumer drives into the typical garden centre, the first thing they will usually see will be piles of compost bags all around them, enticing them to purchase 2 for a £5, 3 for a tenner, or whatever the latest deal is, because obviously these are crucial products for garden centres in terms of turnover. But we have to ask questions about exactly what is in those bags and what the sustainability issues are that result from that content. So peat tends to be the typical main component of the majority of composts.
Okay, dare I ask, tell us more about the issue as you see it?
So peat is quite controversial because whilst peat is a wonderful medium for actually growing products in, everybody says it's the best thing you can possibly have, the problem is that peat is taken out of the natural environment. It's taken from peat bogs that have taken thousands of years typically to develop into their particular state.
Let me put it out there though, gardeners see peat doing a great job. The compost doing a great job. Compost is there to produce a sales stream and a profit stream for a garden centre, but it also gets a better result for the gardener. So the plants they're growing are far better because they're using growing media than if they just planted straight into the ground. By taking the peat and putting it back in a new location, which is doing a lot of good, are we not able to offset the benefit that that's delivering against the removal of it from one location, but the enhancing of so many more locations?
Okay, well, I think that's something that needs to be a lot more research onto the exact trade-offs there. But I think the key point is that the locations from where the peat is taken are changed to a considerable degree. Okay, and it's not just the changes in the ecosystems in those places, also just by removing that peat you are releasing greenhouse gases which will go straight off into the atmosphere and contribute to climate change. So even if you're using that peat in gardens, you've already got that particular problem. So I think the question I'd throw back to you is, are there viable alternatives? And maybe that's something the industry needs to look at. Is peat the only way of actually growing great garden products? Now what we can see in this particular garden centre is a couple of very good examples. So if we look over here, we can see that on these two products we've actually got kind of like barometers that tell you the percentage of peat content. This particular one, as if by chance, is naturally peat free. It has 0% peat, so that is terrific. This one here, there's a clear commitment to sustainability, and the producer is actually telling us on a scale that there's 40 to 70% peat in this particular product. But what I like is at least there is communication here, and this is really, really important. And unfortunately, if you look at a lot of the products in a lot of garden centres around the country, you'll find there is no communication whatsoever about the actual content. You might find some generic statements about commitment to sustainability, commitment to initiatives, but there is often no information about how much actual peat or indeed what is in the bags concerned. And I think in the modern age the consumer likes to know, the consumer likes to make informed choices.
Okay, so we can congratulate these guys on what they're doing at the moment and encourage it further. We know that they are making big strides forward in terms of investigation and testing and trialling of alternatives. We know that the peat content has been reduced over the last few years, and this relatively new declaring peat content is a big step forward, but we want to see more of this taking place and ensure that this becomes the minimum standard of disclosure and more information in future print runs.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Well, thanks to the TV programme Blue Planet 2, plastics have become something of a pariah in the last year or so. And obviously this is an issue that afflicts horticulture as much as any other industry.
Yeah, plant pots, big reaction following that programme about plastic plant pots on plants.
Yes, indeed. I mean, if you look at the data, and it's something like 300 to 400 million plant pots every year are discarded into landfill or into incineration. which is a major problem for the industry, because the problem with the black plant pot is that it's difficult to recycle owing to the pigmentation that's in it. So it just gets discarded with the systems we have in the UK currently.
Okay, now I'll pick up on that because the black plant pot is almost extinct in the industry. In a space of no time at all, the industry grabbed that issue and they've dealt with it. They've come up with new coloured pots which go through recycling systems. The challenge though is beyond the centre, beyond the consumer. It's getting the authorities to recognise that they can now recycle the pots. But as an industry, we've grasped that nettle and have gone with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's excellent news, and it's really good to see that's happening, and you've hit one of the nails right on the head there. It's about having joined up systems and the industry probably needing to actually lobby local authorities and central government to make our recycling systems much more consistent so that we don't have this totally unacceptable problem of plastic from a particular industry ending up contributing to climate change and pollution.
And plastic that's recyclable and recycled, that is though closing down that problem.
It's certainly a significant contribution. Ideally, you'd be moving away from plastic altogether, because even recycled plastic is really just delaying the problem, where you have what we call virgin plastics, new plastics, that will involve using oil-based substances, which again is all about releasing carbon into the atmosphere, so that's all problematic. If we could find systems that will actually enable plastic not to be the main way of holding plants in place, then that would be a great solution. But I suspect that's a little way off, but I know people are looking into experimentation in that area. So plant pots is obviously one area where plastic is used quite a lot in the horticultural sector and in garden centres. What other areas do you think the industry should be paying attention to, Boyd?
Well, we've got a challenge, haven't we, with the plastic bags we're using in terms of the products we're selling are largely travelling to the customer's garden in a plastic bag.
Indeed. How many bags do you think are sold of, say, for example, multimedia compost?
Oh, right. Millions. To be honest, with millions of bags a year sold in the UK.
Wow, so that's millions of bags, they're large bags. You know, when I've looked through these in garden centres, there's a considerable number of brands don't even offer a recyclable bag option. And even on some of the ones that are recyclable, it only says where local authorities offer the right kind of curbside collection. So what we're talking about here is potentially millions of large bags that are just ending up in landfill, and that really isn't acceptable, is it?
It's something which I'm sure the industry is aware of. I know we've seen recently an initiative to launch a recyclable bag in terms of reusable bag, I suppose, that is out there. What I guess we need is the industry joining up together to explore, test and develop these alternative solutions, don't we?
Absolutely, and I think that's the critical thing. It's about the joined up thinking across the industry between different manufacturers, and and almost having a pre-competitive element to this, because the issues are so significant. It isn't about competition between individual firms. We've actually got to find solutions to some of these problems.
Okay, we'll keep working on that one as well. David, garden chemicals, big important department in any garden centre. Issues?
Well, according to the World Health Organization, garden chemicals are intrinsically toxic. Now, of course, this shouldn't really surprise us because their fundamental job is to kill things. But yeah, it is a serious issue. I mean, if we go back 50 years or so ago, this particular book, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, was published in 1962, in which the author portrayed a world in which spring indeed became silent. Now, we haven't reached a world where spring is silent, but there's an awful lot of evidence to show that spring is becoming quieter because the effect of chemicals within the ecosystems, reducing the number of insects, reducing the number of birds, and the stats around this are frightening. We're talking about 41% of insects globally are in a state of considerable decline, about a quarter are threatened with extinction. Butterflies in the UK, about a quarter of butterfly species are also threatened with extinction. So we're talking about very, very significant challenges here for people to consider.
Okay, so as an industry, we've got to find a new way of thinking, and we've got to be able to find a way of delivering for our customers a great garden where they live side by side with the wildlife.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's also a case of staying ahead of regulation as well, because obviously governments have to act when research indicates there are long-term problems with chemicals. You look at the list of banned chemicals, over a number of years, and it's amazing how many chemicals have been on the market. Then, through their long-term use, they find out the effects, then they're just banned. Glyphosate's very much in that journey at the moment. It's been banned in Holland and a number of other countries. What would happen to the industry here if government were just to take the step and say, no, we're going to ban glyphosate from 2021 or whatever, say that happened? What position is the industry to respond? So it's a business risk issue as well as anything else.
Okay, no answers right now, but one to be worked on.
Definitely, definitely. So we're now thinking about the positive things to do with horticulture, and of course trees and shrubs, one of their inherent properties is the ability to sequester carbon, and this is where we've got a very, very positive story to tell. So research conducted at a university in the United States has shown that, for example, a single red maple tree in its lifetime can sequester 664 kilograms of carbon, which is a significant offset against any other issues created in its production. And even if you think about the humble viburnum shrub, for example, perhaps you could pick one up, Boyd, and show the audience. This little chap, when it's grown to maturity in its lifetime, can sequester up to 10 kilograms of carbon. So if we think about the cumulative effects of long-term planting, actually there's a really good story to tell here, and this should be very much part of the sustainability journey of the industry, to be encouraging much more long-term planting and to be aware of those kind of positive impacts that the industry can create.
Well, that's got to be great, hasn't it? To get this massive message out that fill your garden with plants, fill your balcony with plants, fill your window box with plants, and you're going to be making a massive contribution back to the environment.
Yeah.
Huge, huge.
Yeah, I mean, this is a story that really needs to be told. There needs to be some thought around it, because the key thing is that people plant things and leave it. Don't just rip it out of the ground after 2 or 3 years because fashion has changed. But if you want to do something positive for sustainability, this is what you should do. And of course, we also know the other positive impact that comes from long-term planting: biodiversity development. So you plant these particular products, and what are you going to get? You're going to get more insects, you're going to get more forms of wildlife developing in that particular area, which again is a positive for the environment, and it's positive for the planet as a whole.
Brilliant. So we need placards for tomorrow, plant today.
Sounds good. Bird feeding is a really interesting subject actually, Boyd, because about half of the UK's households do habitually feed the birds in their gardens. Obviously this creates a nice little niche income for your average garden centre, but it's more than just a little bit of fun. If you actually look at the research undertaken by the RSPB, they've shown that there are significant positive benefits for total bird populations, and also it's helped to reverse the decline in certain species of birds as well. So this is all really positive stuff. Which is very positive for the industry as well as for the environment.
Okay, and I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm guessing that in your sustainable world, increasing in, say, blackbirds, which is increasing in slug control, therefore would move us on to a reduction in the need for other ways to deal with them. So bird feeding is actually part of the bigger picture as well.
Absolutely got it, Boyd. This is the theme that we're developing through this discussion this morning. Is all about how everything is part of a system, and if you do one beneficial thing, it can lead to other beneficial things as well. Absolutely.
Brilliant. It's a tick in the box already then.
Yeah, absolutely. Your typical garden centre tends to present a very specific image of what a garden should look like, and that tends to be about it being orderly, about it being pristine, about everything being varying shades of lush green and so forth, and that anything bad just needs to be got rid of with chemicals. And ultimately those particular aspects are not that compatible really with a sustainability approach, because real nature and so forth tends to have a little bit of chaos involved in it, if you want to put it in that, in that particular way. And maybe we need to start thinking about a different way of actually approaching gardening and what it is that a garden contributes, not just to the consumer, but also to the industry and the broader world that we live in.
Okay, so we're looking for a new normal for gardens, so they are making a difference. And pulling back from the gardens, we're looking for a new style of garden centre retailing that really captures that normality, and that becomes business as normal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Boyd, really. I think there's a real opportunity here for taking a new approach. And I think one of the crucial things is not just to think about sustainability in terms of just trying to counteract the negatives, if you like, but it's actually trying to accentuate the positives, because I think what we've seen with our little tour is how through gardening, you can actually do an awful lot to promote biodiversity, to counteract climate change and so forth. And actually focusing on how to be positive about the sustainability impacts is the way forward.
Right. I'm seeing win, 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 win for everybody.
Yep.
Win for the growers, win for the retailers, win for the gardener, win for the environment, the climate, the world.
Got it.
A lot of wins.
A lot of wins.
To realise these wins, though, we've now got to start looking at the market, haven't we? The young generations, the people we're seeing out there at the moment, really actively talking about climate change and the environment, think clearly very differently to maybe the baby boomers about this issue. And of course, those are our customers that are on the way, or potentially our customers. So we've got to start looking at what they're wanting and make sure we address that as well.
Yes, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, the attitudes of the young people, as we're seeing in many ways through some media reports around Extinction Rebellion and so forth. Yes, those are the extreme ends, if you like, of activism. But there seems to be no doubt from the market research that younger consumers are thinking about their place in the world very differently, and they're making very different consumer choices. And it's very hard to see how your average younger consumer these days is going to be seduced into spending money in a garden centre where they're kind of like, their immediate vision is that of red bottles of chemicals, saying hazard on them, and large bags of unrecyclable plastic laying around. That kind of era, I think, is passing by now, and something different needs to happen to engage with this new group of consumers.
And yet we've got the product, the plant, the seeds, the bulbs that they do want. So we've got to make sure they come to us for that, and we make sure that they see garden centres, the independent trade, the UK retail garden centre seen as being the solution that they are looking for, and don't get put off by the other things. And therefore we need to address all those things and make sure we are in step with the future market.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think this is the time to be bold, innovative, and to connect with those markets. I mean, we see the speed of movement within the tech industry, how fast companies are able to move the way they market their products and produce their products and so forth, so that they connect with consumers, and we see change happen within months. And I think, one could say the horticulture industry to a degree is a bit of a dinosaur in that aspect, and now is the time to be nimble and to connect with that future, not just to make money for all the suppliers and retailers and so forth, but also to have a substantive impact upon the issues of biodiversity loss and climate change that are threatening us all currently.
So dare I say, to be a sustainable business, we're going to have to embrace sustainability more than ever before.
Yes, I think this is exactly the message I was trying to put across earlier on within the slides at the introduction to this presentation, is that sustainability contains the pillars of the economy, the society and environment, and we've got to keep all three of those things at play.
I think you've just thrown down the gauntlet for us to take that forward through the rest of today and make sure that we're concentrating on how to make the difference. David, thank you very much for your time today and for the insight into where we need to be going in the future. It's been a pleasure meeting you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope you all have a great day going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.